Hello and welcome to the Movie Moolah podcast. My name is Ben Yenny, and with me today is Evette Vargas, who I've known for a long time, partially through Clubhouse. I don't remember if that's actually how we met or whether we'd crossed paths before, but I know that's how we became friends.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. And that's a great question. I believe we crossed paths before Clubhouse, Ben, because we run in many of the same circles, but
Mhm.
obviously it's when we got to know each other much better was on Clubhouse.
Yeah. Why don't we talk a little bit about who you are and what you do, to get started? Where did you before Clubhouse, where did you gain the expertise to actually be hosting rooms that were really insanely successful during the peak of Clubhouse?
Thank you. Well, thank you for that. Just in terms of public speaking, I guess, is specifically one of the skills that's necessary, I think, to host any kind of conversation. And I think I was just really fortunate to grow up in a family that was extremely chatty. So those are absolutely the foundation of communication, or the importance of communication. And in my family, you absolutely had to compete to get your story told. So I learned how to do that. But I've had a tremendous amount of experience speaking on panels, and also moderating and hosting events. So it's experience for sure. And then I've also played many leadership roles. I was in leadership at the WGA for about 10 years, as first a vice chair, and then a co-chair of the Latinx Writers Committee, as well as other committees. And so I've played leadership roles, and that, I believe, absolutely attributed to my success in being able to host these conversations that we have in New Hollywood, and basically just found the New Hollywood movement as it's known currently.
Very nice. What for those of our listeners who don't know what the New Hollywood movement is, what are you trying to do and why did you call it the New Hollywood?
Excellent. Well, I'll begin first with why I called it New Hollywood. That's been a term. New Hollywood has been a term that I have personally been using for over a decade. I very much have been involved in the diversity, inclusion, and equity conversations and efforts, again, for over a decade. And the idea of a new Hollywood, or what a new Hollywood looks like, excuse me, is something that, again, I've been absolutely just extremely involved in as an activist.
Mhm.
Um, and also with someone who has offered solutions, possible solutions, because all the efforts help. So then when I got onto Clubhouse, which was in January of 2021, there was really only one conversation that I wanted to truly have, to utilize platform to have, was the New Hollywood conversation and the New Hollywood movement conversation. And basically, so New Hollywood, it is a community of storytellers, executives, and entrepreneurs that are focused on unifying, organizing, and mobilizing the New Hollywood movement. We have joined forces to collaborate, ideate, and educate the current and next generations of storytellers and disrupt old Hollywood paradigms. Together, we will change the face of the industry and transform the world with our stories. New Hollywood is you, New Hollywood is us, New Hollywood is here, New Hollywood is now, is basically our mission, and everything that we're up to. And that's the foundation of the New Hollywood movement.
You don't have much pushback from me on an in on a industry that needs to change more for the smaller voices of our creators. I did start a distribution company called Mutiny uh with reason. Have you had much pushback from the greater industry?
I mean, from the greater industry, yes. So I'm, for myself, I am a writer, a
Mhm.
director, a producer, a television development executive. I mean, those are the hats that I primarily wear these days in terms of a profession and also employment. And but I also have a background, an extensive background in graphic design, and as well as other creative areas, because I grew up drawing, painting, and writing. I was always a visual storyteller. I was always a very, very creative person. Um, and when I started working in Hollywood and actually became extremely acquainted with the numbers, then the disparaging numbers when it does, when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion is when I actually realized how bad the situation actually is. How actually how because the numbers don't lie, right? And every single year, and sometimes even biannually, there are many reports that are published, UCLA being one that is well respected. The WGA, they publish their own report, again, as well as other entities. And although, of course, strides have been made, it's incremental. It's just incremental progress in
Mhm.
terms of literally having voices with an opportunity not only to be heard but to have influence, and ultimately having green light power. And so those numbers are quite small, with anyone from an underrepresented group
Mhm.
really ultimately having that green light power. And this is and that's the greatest reason, Ben, as to why we just don't see more authentic, just authentic characters,
Mhm.
period, in narratives, and certainly more stories told by people from underrepresented groups, because we just don't have that kind of again, green light
Yeah,
power.
no, that makes
So the pushback, the pushback, sure. So, the pushback, whether it is conscious or not, because there is unbiased, all right, there just I mean, there are biases and unconscious biases that, there's nepotism. People tend to
Mhm.
hire their friends. People tend to hire, people that make them feel comfortable, which, for the most part, sadly, it's people that look like you. And
And
and yeah, and then therefore you just don't have this opportunity to expand your notion of what other people are, and just different points of view, different walks of life, which is just critically important for the world.
Mhm.
So the pushback just comes, it comes from, that's one of the biggest reasons. And then and then also, there's always this need, this necessary aspect of the business, and especially in film. I mean, in television, but more
Mhm.
in film, where, as you know, where, it comes back to, it's like, okay, well, what is the value of those particular actors? What is the value of those particular filmmakers? And again, for, those, most of those that get a chance to have a bat at it and continue to create
Mhm.
content and grow their credits, most of that, that list, there aren't that many people from underrepresented groups there. So therefore, then, to get the funding, and really push a project up the pipeline that is
Mhm.
necessary, it just becomes even harder, because there aren't that many of us.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, and I go on and on and on, but, but these are some of the reasons as to why pushback occurs, Ben.
That's very true, and I mean, we as producers or distributors tend to rely pretty heavily on precedent and what has performed well in the past, but if there is something genuinely unprecedented, it can easily be missed. The biggest, most recent example I can think of would be, Black Panther. Just in the fact that every Marvel studio executive, according to pretty widely available reports, were really surprised how well that particular IP translated. And a lot of that just comes down to pretty much everybody who doesn't look like me is to some degree an underserved niche audience. And
Absolutely. Yes.
it shouldn't be that hard to put those together. And I do want to push back a tiny bit on the intent behind some of the nepotism.
Sure.
Sometimes it's very relationship based business.
Yes.
And sometimes it's just easier to get things done by calling somebody you know who will deliver for you and making sure you meet your deadlines. It's not always exclusionary practices are not always the intent. I'm not saying that they
Yeah.
are
And
never the intent by any means,
no,
but
for sure.
yeah.
Yes. And I can understand that, Ben.
Mhm.
Because at the, look, ultimately you have to deliver, right?
Mhm.
And you want people on your team that can deliver. So I, of course, understand that. But at the same time, if you are in that driver's seat, I believe that you have a responsibility to open the door. So even if you're not opening the door, certainly for an upper level type of position, and when you're building, your team with those that can deliver, absolutely. Again, I believe it's a responsibility to offer opportunities to those that first of all, they deserve the shot. They
Mhm.
absolutely deserve the shot. And if you don't give them the shot, then you're expecting someone else to. There's just a consciousness, there's a
Mhm.
consciousness, Ben, that is necessary. And that's why the unconscious bias aspect of the conversation, sadly, is people who don't even realize that they actually have the power to open the door.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I do think that there is enough of a demand for diverse content that there's kind of the opposite end of the coin here, which is because there's a demand for it, there are a lot of unscrupulous actors who will gobble up diverse content and just use the old shotgunning model, which is throw everything against the wall and see what sticks. And with certain elements of diverse content, it's very, very easy to get those placed on AVOD right now, which means a lot of distributors are just kind of acting like high price aggregators to a level and pushing films out there on the assumption that 2 in 10 will make money and the rest will lose, but the 2 that made money will be more than enough to make the distributor's bottom line happy. And I disagree. I mean, there's always going to be some degree of that in distribution. It's just the nature of the game. But I don't think that that justifies just dropping everything you can as quickly as you can, which is what the way a lot of distributors go. And it kind of is counterintuitive. It kind of does a lot of damage to the diversification of Hollywood because people will use those 2 in 10 numbers to say, oh, well, it didn't really perform that well, so we're not taking on that sort of content anymore. Even
Sure.
though a lot of it is just that you didn't put the proper work into it. So
Absolutely.
yeah,
Most of the time, yeah. That's that most of the time, that's the case. Well, first of all, look, it has to be good.
yeah.
It certainly has to be good enough that it builds a buzz, after the initial weekend, right? Opening weekend. So that then in those communities and in circles and just buzz, I mean, the
Mhm.
power of that. But there needs to be enough of an effort and enough funds and enough support initially behind everything to properly market it. So you can't blame the filmmakers for the lack of that.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think every filmmaker needs to be some degree of entrepreneur themselves, and they do need to cultivate an audience around them, primarily to serve as the early adopters, the people who will go first. Um, because if you don't have that first group, you'll never have the second, third, or fourth groups. It's just about that initial circle of influence that a distributor can build on. And even the ethical distributors often can't build your audience from nothing unless they're a very targeted, repeat niche distributor who only works with this audience. But it's, my point there is more to say that I think the biggest path forward for this industry as a whole is
Sorry.
for filmmakers to really be more savvy of their own business concerns, which is part of why I do this podcast and blogs and everything else there, because it's not always easy to find how. But that's why I think New Hollywood and everything you're doing is also so valuable, and why I wanted to invite you on here. So
Thank you. Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you for that. And I do agree in terms of where every filmmaker also needs to be entrepreneurial, and they need to be thinking about the business from the very beginning. And this is you know, I mean, it's the business, it isn't something generally that artists are taught.
Mhm.
It isn't part of the same conversation as creation and producing, which is part of a big part of the problem.
Mhm.
You know, if that was part of the education to begin with, you know, the end result, or the end results, I think, would be vastly different, because you would have very astute filmmakers understanding how to move forward. So, you know, so that's certainly, in terms of a broken system, that's a huge part of it, just from the education perspective. And then once a filmmaker, just a creative person, is educated on the business side, they're just naturally going to make different kinds of decisions, and also seek out an expansion of the relationships that they actually do have in you know, in the business. It just becomes savvier all the way around. So that's an area that needs vast improvement.
Mhm.
Then, and hopefully whoever listens to this, you know, will take that note, that, you know, equally as you are a student of telling your stories, really developing your craft, that you also need to be a student of the business.
Even I started out wanting to be a writer director, and I just respecialized as a producer, and then further respecialized as a producer's rep and exec as my career journey unfolded. But there were like 4 producing classes I could take in the entirety of my undergrad film school, and that is nowhere near enough.
No.
Um, it's a it's funny. I've actually spoken um with several friends who have kids who wanted to be producers as they were going to college, and most of them go to undergrad for business or pre-law, and then they go to a master's film program, because it's that backing is just not really taught in any major film schools. There are a couple of it. Like I think Boston University has a pretty good program there, but outside of that, it's not a thing. And that's frankly part of why why filmmakers find themselves in such an exploitable position, I think.
Correct.
Yeah.
I agree, and quite frankly, I think that that's an excellent path,
Hmm.
is to learn law, the law, and, you know, entertainment law specifically.
Hmm.
And then after that, study the craft. You're just in the best position, needless to say, that you could obviously draft your own contracts and be in
Helps
a
a
very strong
lot.
position. Yes, and to be in a very strong position to negotiate. So, you know, you will not be fooled. So and I do have friends. Actually, there are many writers, Ben, that were attorneys, you know, that
Mhm.
were attorneys that then made the jump. It's actually a quite common jump, from you know, from being a lawyer to a writer.
Mhm.
I don't know as many attorneys that go directly into directing, but there's certainly the path of an attorney then becoming a writer and then becoming a writer director. So I think that's more of the journey in terms of getting to directing. But I think it's, it's critical. It's really smart. And if you're thinking about getting into the business, absolutely study the law.
Oh yeah. It's also, I'm not a lawyer, much to my parents' chagrin, but I do have a decent understanding of the law that I use to guide my own choices, but I also talk to lawyers a lot, and most of those lawyers do a ton of drafting, so it makes sense to move to being a writer in some degree.
Yes.
And also, some of the best producers I know have some backing in law, because the difference between a producer and a lawyer is sometimes a lot more thin than people would like to acknowledge. Of course, if your producer is not a lawyer, talk to a lawyer. But
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, no, definitely. I couldn't agree. I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. Again, the point is also be a student of the business, whether whether it's law or you go and you work at an agency, although that can be a
hard these
nightmare.
days. Yeah.
Yeah, it's it's a nightmare, but you learn the business. You do learn the business, even if you spend a year there, and a year there is like 5 years anywhere else.
Mhm.
But you really will learn the business, which is imperative. And again, my colleagues in the industry that did begin, in the agencies, in those mail rooms, and and climb their way up, they're just in an excellent position, because again, they really understand how the business works.
Yeah. I mean, how would you even get an assistant job in this day and age? Do you know? I mean, is this something
Yeah,
you tell
well,
people to?
yeah, no, I mean, you have to be extremely persistent.
Mhm.
You have to reach out to, I mean, there are many different ways. I mean, obviously, where you live is a factor, but if you live in any of the cities where there's a tremendous amount of production that occurs, like, of course, Georgia and now New Jersey, which is a booming, and New York, of course, and there are several other states, where they're production meccas, in the U.S.,
Mhm.
or if you happen to be in Toronto, and I mean, again, there are these prominent cities and locations where production is, viable businesses. Then you basically have to do everything that you possibly can to form relationships with anyone who
Mhm.
who is on set, and then of course, mind those relationships for any kind of assistant
Mhm.
position that you can just get yourself on set, which is, absolutely critical for anyone that's breaking into the business. And those assistant jobs, although they're extremely competitive, but it's an excellent way in. So, to be an assistant on set in any department, just get in there, regardless of department, just get in there, is critical. And then also production companies, contact production companies, even if you initially have to offer your services for free, so it's like, like a free internship or even volunteer. It's a
Mhm.
relationship business. Get your foot in the door, prove your worth, and make yourself invaluable. And that's really the key. That's how, it's one thing to get the job. It's another thing to keep the job. And you
Mhm.
really need to make yourself invaluable. Use your superpower. Bring a skill set that utilize a skill set that no one else has, or a skill set that's just absolutely necessary, and do it at an extremely high level to make yourself invaluable. And therefore that's how you will climb up the ladder. But
Mhm.
uh but it's really however you can put yourself in those situations, Ben, is what is necessary.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. One thing that I would also say, if you're not in a position to be able to take a full-time volunteer gig, which that's totally understandable. We
Of
all have
course.
bills. One thing you could consider trying, especially if you're based in LA or Berlin or lucky you, Con, the every time those film markets come up, there's going to be a lot of sales agents in from out of town who could really use somebody to stand at the front of their booth and manage their schedule and their check-in and make sure everybody has water. It doesn't sound like it's glamorous work, and it's not, but you're going to learn more in that week than you do in at least 1 year of film school, because you're actually going to see what these talks look like as part of
Absolutely.
doing that job.
Yeah, I agree. And also all the people that you will meet,
Mm-hmm.
is invaluable. So I absolutely agree. I think that's an excellent idea. So, yeah, and to be extended with, festivals, various markets, and just even industry focused events. They can always use volunteers. So just put yourself in those positions. So yeah, no, excellent advice. And and then of course, then there's the other side, when you actually, when you have produced content, right? When you've written a script, or you've produced a short or a proof of concept, which I currently have, such as Confessions, Ben, which you're a little bit familiar with. Then of course your job is for people to see it, right? To get people to see it, however you can, and of course there is the distribution aspect of that, but then there's also, going back to the entrepreneur aspect of the conversation that we had. There are many ways, there are just many options that you can take to literally put yourself in a position to get yourself seen, and also your content seen, which is critically important. Such as, one of the things that I've done with Confessions, which is a proof of concept literally for a universe that I create. I'm very much a world builder, Ben, which I know that you're familiar with. And I have a whole history of that. I've been hired time and time again by studios and production companies and various entities, to develop material and develop worlds, and universes, and of course franchises. So Confessions very much is a universal world, and a franchise. And so I wrote, directed, and produced a proof of concept short, a 21-minute short that establishes this world, and the story. And it's a piece of content that I have been able to leverage now to get to the next level. So that's definitely something else that I recommend. It's a very entrepreneurial choice to create a proof of concept, knowing your end game, where you want to end up, and then how you can leverage this proof of concept that you've produced to help you get you there. So with Confessions, specifically, some of my objectives are, a television series, a traditional, well, I'm only saying traditional because I'm going to be selling it to old Hollywood, certainly pitching it to old Hollywood after the writer's strike. I've partnered with the very well-established writer, creator, executive producer, showrunner. And so we've been preparing to take it to old Hollywood, after the writer's strike. But in terms of leveraging what I've produced, then where that will be part of the negotiation, is to leverage the fact that I've already established this intellectual property, have built up a community slash audience slash fan base, which again, you mentioned earlier, which is critically important. And also, of course, share the success metrics of all of that, which puts the creator in a bit of a different driver's seat, certainly having a bit of a different conversation than just anyone, like the average person who is pitching, a television series. They also, most of the time have not established the intellectual property. So ultimately a television series, definitely is one of my end games. And also building out this universe. So I have film financiers that are also interested in the feature film. So I have been taking those kinds of meetings and exploring all of that, because that may be the best next step, right? As opposed to pursuing the television series. So that's something also that's ongoing. And then in addition to that, last year I closed a deal with a company in Spain called Serialify. It's the word serial and IFY, so Serialify.com. You can check them out. And we're producing 6 interactive animated episodes of Confessions, which will be distributed on their platform, which is an app. And that is will be premiering in November, and I'm so extremely thrilled about it. And and that has many revenue models built into, various revenue models built into that, which again, storytellers, creators, they need to be thinking about the various revenue streams that are available to them with the content and the IP that they are creating. So my end game, my big vision is to create this universe, to create this Confessions franchise, and I'm currently taking all of the steps to make that happen.
I haven't heard of too many. I guess the old term for it would have been transmedia universes
Yeah,
being made.
that's the older term. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the old term. It really is a universe. It's I mean, it is a multi-platform franchise for sure. But it's world building, it is a universe, and the story will be told across different mediums and platforms, and I have been establishing that.
I've always found that proof of concepts are kind of a mixed bag in terms of how much utility they actually gain you. Have you actually been getting traction out of your proof of concept?
Absolutely. Yes. I mean, because first of all, my proof of concept is a short that has a beginning, middle, and end. So it's a satisfying story, on its own as a standalone story, as opposed to just a scene, right? A proof of concept can be anything. But yeah, so it tells a full and complete story. And therefore, it's been doing very well in film festivals. We just got into our eighth film festival, actually, and we've won 5 awards, thus far. So it's actually been doing quite well at film festivals. But ultimately, what it has allowed me to do is it allows me to have a shorthand, Ben, when I have a conversation with someone after they have seen it, where now I can tell them about the universe. It is like a fantastic jumping off point for that. And then there have been also monetization. I've been able to to monetize on this proof of concept with, various different platforms that I've been involved with, and different efforts that I've been involved with. I've been able to utilize it also to raise funds. So it has been extremely beneficial. And then because I've shot the concept, I've been able to also produce a very compelling trailer that, in a minute, and I can send that out, and I have sent it out. It's just very effective. People see the trailer, they're compelled by it. It has gotten me meetings and so much more. So it's been extremely beneficial.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely need to be able to show something in this industry. It's I have been able to get shockingly high level meetings based solely on a splash trailer.
Yes.
And it's in one film that I'm working on a lot right now, Tim Travers and the Time Traveler's Paradox started out of a short that the director just did to try to build his skills for another thing we're working on. And then this industry has a lot of very strange stories in it, which I can't publicly tell due to pending litigation. But it is it's gonna be a really interesting story when we can. But Tim Travers, in and of itself, I don't think we were ever planning on making that into the movie that we made. It was a short, and that was gonna be it. But it also, having that IP that we could quickly develop into a script, made all the difference in the world. And now it's going to make it so that we can actually make the other one we were trying to make, because it was because now this guy, it's Stimson's Need. He's going to be on another one of these podcasts. I don't know what the release order will be, but now he's a tested director, and we're getting a ton of interest based on that. So when you're getting started, it's probably the hardest time in your career. You're going to have struggles throughout your career. You're going to need to constantly grow. But once you have a little bit of a track record, it's less that you're trying to barge down the door in more that you're trying to renovate the house that you're in,
Correct.
for
Yeah,
lack of
I
a
agree
better
with that.
term.
Sure.
Mhm.
Yes, I would agree with that. And then of course, you know, you're able to leverage the relationships that you have. You know, it's a give and take, you know, kind of business. And I'm always of the firm, a huge believer that you know, with every relationship, always come to it with how can I support you? How can I give to you? And then I mean, all of that comes back tenfold. And also with that kind of mindset, and just approach and intention, that it establishes just a very firm foundation actually for a real human connection and growing relationships that are meaningful. So as you continue to, you know, to do that, because it is such a relationship heavy type of industry, that then, you know, you can rely on those relationships, you know, during the good times and the lower points. So that's always something else that's critically important. Be a good human and be in service, you know, always be in service, because that really does come back, and it helps you have longevity in this business. And in terms of, you know, I think you need to just be extremely clear in terms of what it is, and create a plan for yourself, a strategy for yourself that you can enact, you know, take efforts in every single day to actually get there. So I think you just need to be really focused, Ben, also.
Mhm.
And even though, I mean, you know, when you are beginning your career, you know, I mean, many people, sure, they may begin their careers by wanting to pursue acting, but then they realize, you know what, I actually don't have what it takes, or it's just, you know, it's the time, you know, it's just not my time, you know, for that. But then they discover other things, right? They can discover writing. They can just discover other things that their talent actually may be better suited for. And that happens quite a bit.
Mhm.
So, you know, so I just think, you know, I think you need to be open, although, you know, you think that that actually your calling may be in one area, but you actually discover that it was something else. And I just think you have to be open.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're totally right. And this is the reason that I still do podcasts like this and blogs and all of that is a concerted effort to continue to give back, and try to send the ladder back down, for lack of a better term. Again, but and I have a feeling that's at least part of why you do New Hollywood as well. Because,
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, New Hollywood is a tremendous opportunity for me to, you know, to give back. First of all, just to give, period. And
Mhm.
certainly to give back, and to share the information and resources, right? Because in the entertainment industry for such a long time, you know, the gatekeeping is real. The gatekeeping is real, and the hoarding of information is also extremely real. So to demystify and democratify just various aspects of the industry is absolutely necessary. And that's how we will build a new Hollywood. We need to be sharing the information and resources so that everyone can thrive, and therefore everyone can lift each other up simultaneously. And
Mhm.
that's the power, you know, and that is the power moving forward together as opposed to individuals.
Okay. Are you still affiliated with the WGA?
Yes, absolutely. I'm a member, yeah, and I've been
Okay.
on the picketing lines. And yeah, I absolutely am affiliated.
Uh, can I ask you your opinion on the strike, or is that not something you're allowed to talk about?
Sure. Yeah, no, I absolutely, and you know, I talk about it. I talk about it as often as I can. You know, I think first of all, I'm just thrilled that SAG has also now joined the picket lines. I mean, of course, they've been picketing along with us, but now in terms of their union as well, you know, this was the X factor, whether
Mhm.
SAG was going to join us. I mean, of course, we were also hoping that the DGA would also join us in this particular fight, because at this moment, it's just such an inflection
Mhm.
period in the industry, and we absolutely we need to carve out our place and our space in
Mhm.
it, to have enduring careers. Period, Ben. That's
Oh,
where it's at.
entirely. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is the right fight. If COVID did not occur, we would have been on strike. We would have had this strike 3 years ago.
Hmm.
This has been going on for quite some time, but it just, during COVID, it clearly it just wasn't the time to do it. So, but this is the time, and we are absolutely going to we're standing our ground. So when we do ultimately get back to the table with the AMPTP, it's not to balk. And sure, of course, we will be there to seriously negotiate, but we are not going to take a deal that not only does it not serve us today, but will not serve us 5 to 10 years from now.
Oh yeah. I mean, the digital royalties from the last major strike were the sticking point, and they did not get resolved adequately, if I remember
Absolutely
correctly.
not.
Yeah.
No, no, no. I mean, no. And that's part of the problem now.
Hmm.
Again, that was in 2007, 2008 was the last strike, which went for about 102 or 103 days.
Hmm.
And I actually became a member in 2008. Well, during the strike was when I became a member. And in terms of, what was gained, or the formula that was calculated at the time, the digital space, we pretty much have been operating with that formula pretty much up until today. And,
Hmm.
which is a huge part of the problem, because even though, of course, streaming is, the medium, right? Streaming
Hmm.
is the medium for everything. That formula, for the most part, has not been adjusted. And, with some exception here and there, and even when it has, it still wasn't great. It wasn't adequate. And of course, lack of transparency has a lot to do with that.
Oh yeah.
um has a lot to do with that. And that's one of the things that we're fighting for now, is transparency.
And that's good
um
for everybody, no
it's good
matter
for
what
everyone.
side you're on. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. So, so certainly that is a sticking point. But, and we do have a new formula that we've put in place. And then also, Ben, let us not forget that now all of the streamers also have they are, also monetizing off of ad revenue, which is, something that wasn't there
Hmm.
for quite some time, where it was just subscriptions. And then, product integration, just various other forms. But, occasional licensing, depending on, whoever the network was. I mean, certainly, that was a viable, monetization model, and still is. But in terms of, but in terms of now the ad revenue, which brings us back to the old television model,
Hmm.
um, that all of this needs to be all of this all of these aspects are extremely important, elements for the recalculation of a formula that works for everyone, for first of all compensation, and then secondly, of course, residuals.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think, I mean, it gets covered a lot in the trades still, but for those of you who don't follow the trades, I don't think it's really adequately expressed exactly how little transparency there is in terms of view numbers from any SVOD outlet. The most clear thing that I've seen on Netflix is just gross calculations based on their daily top tens, which is frankly somewhat meaningless, really, for most
Absolutely.
of the stuff on their platform. It's
Yeah,
it,
no, oh,
yeah.
yeah, and even with that, and even with the top tens, or the most popular, the most viewed,
Mhm.
content on any SVOD, or streaming or streamer, is that doesn't change the deals that were already in place. It's not as if those creators are getting bonuses, Ben.
No.
So it doesn't matter. And that, again, so now moving forward with negotiations, all of that needs to be in all of the contracts, all the new contracts moving forward. It's like, okay, well, look, if you reach this threshold, then those creators, those producers, those directors, they need to be compensated for that, because all of that, all of that profit and all of that notoriety, it goes to the streamer.
Oh, entirely. And it feels kind of like video games in the 90s where they didn't even want to put credits in on it. It's not exactly the same, but it feels like it's definitely heading that direction. And even though I am a distributor, executive producer, all of this, most of the time, I'm not big enough for anybody to pick it against, but I would be perceived as being on the other side.
Sure.
I'd be more likely to join the pickets. It's if nothing else, then as a small independent distributor, not having any idea how many views your content got on a platform is kind of absurd. I mean, I want to be clear here, at least those of us who were in the level that Mutiny was at and that part of the pay chain, we get a one-time license fee for the subscription video on demand license, and we get no information beyond that. Half the time we don't even get told the drop date, so we can't promote it even though we're not getting anything out of it directly. It's so the lack of communication is so vast that I think it's hard for people to understand exactly how necessary this strike is, if nothing else, than to get an idea of how much our content is watched. And
Well,
that's
how much our content is watched and how much our content is worth.
Yeah. Completely agree. It's a yeah.
Yes, one of the things that I tell creators all the time is never underestimate the value of your own IP.
Completely. I mean, like, part of what I do as a producer is to actually do at least a couple of the negotiation rounds for option agreements. Normally more around IP than around scripts. But I can tell you, most content creators don't always accurately value their IP from having been on the other side of that.
I would say probably 99%.
I'd say that's about right. And that does cut a bit in both directions, but it does probably cut more towards undervaluation, especially when you're dealing with digital age creators more than anything. Well, Evette, I asked the same 3 questions to all of my guests in order to close out. And the first question sometimes takes a second to think about, so you can answer it second if you like. And that first question is, what are your top 3 favorite movies as it stands right this second now? They can change in 10 minutes. They can be an entirely different 3. But as of this second, what are they?
Yeah. And of course it's such a difficult question. But as of right now, The Godfather, although it's cliche, but it's still, I mean, it's spectacular. So, the Godfather, certainly I would put the first 2 Godfathers just in that one spot, our masterpieces. It's a Wonderful Life. I absolutely adore. It's just an absolutely beautiful, beautiful, beautiful story. The meaning behind that. And wow, I mean, I can't even think of a third, just because there are so many films that I adore and I'm extremely passionate about. But one of them that just came to mind is Birdman. which I also just love and adore. Actually, there's another film that just came to mind. I'm going to mention it just because I have to. Cinema Paradiso,
Mm.
which is just incredible. Again,
Mhm.
beautiful, beautiful, beautiful story told. I'll stop. I'll stop there. There are so many incredible films, but those are some of my favorites.
Yeah, those are all good picks. Um, I met Francis Ford Coppola twice in San Francisco, and I represented one of his nephew's films. Um,
Excellent.
yeah, they're very interesting. I'll save that story for another podcast. But part of the reason I went to film school and wanted to make films at all was Apocalypse Now. It was a big
Yeah,
thing, and I did mention that to Francis, to which he said, "I'm sorry, filmmakers are not well treated in this industry."
this is
But
true. Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, that's another one of my favorites as well. I mean, it's just
mhm. It's a
magnificent.
good movie. It's
Yeah.
rough, but it's good. I mean, like
Yeah,
it's a rough watch. It's very well polished. Just
exactly.
yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I mean,
Um,
just the opening alone, it's just
oh,
incredible.
yeah. So then the second question is, if you could go back in time and give yourself one piece of advice, what it would it be, and when would you give it?
Well, I mean, we talked about it earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Get on set however you can.
Mm-hmm.
Find a way to get that assistant job, even if you have to volunteer. Critically important. And also, be in service, as we mentioned earlier. Always when you meet someone, well, I mean, what I would say is communicate. Be very clear in communicating your bio and keep it short, and your bio, it needs to include what is most unique about yourself, and by the way, and what is most unique and compelling about yourself, and that includes the bad stuff
Mm-hmm.
that has happened, that has informed your voice, and again makes you memorable. So the story that you tell about yourself to somebody else, it needs to be memorable. And with that story, you also need to communicate what your intention is, what are your aspirations, so
Mm-hmm.
that actually forms an opportunity for someone else to be aware of how they can help you. And so that's critical. Knowing how to pitch yourself, tell your own story. Not only is it necessary, but this is critical to your success. I truly believe that, Ben. So those would be my top three. Get on set, or
Mm-hmm.
get in that room however you can. Be in service, to others. Be a good human. Certainly be in service. Don't expect, just for people to help you, just for the sake of helping you. Like, just be in service to others, and they naturally will then, want to help you, and then be able to tell your own story in a way that is really compelling, but also very concise, just in a few moments,
Mm-hmm.
and include your intention, your aspirations, what it is that you are on your way towards.
That sounds great. And then the final question, possibly the hardest one of the whole time, which would be, what are you looking for and where can people find you?
Okay, great. Excellent. Fantastic. Well, I mean, where people can find me, of course, on most of my socials, Instagram, Twitter, Threads. It's at the Evette Vargas. So I'm actually pretty easy to find, but at the Evette Vargas is really my main handle across many platforms. You can also, of course, find me on Clubhouse every single Wednesday at 12 p.m. Pacific time, 3 p.m. Eastern, for our New Hollywood show. And you should absolutely tune in and join us and become part of our New Hollywood community, which is incredible. We're almost 33,000 strong, 33,000 members strong, Ben. So it's an incredible movement. So you want to become part of the New Hollywood movement. And that's also where you can find me. And then on LinkedIn, absolutely on LinkedIn, Evette Vargas, you'll find me there. So those are some of the main places to find me. And then in terms of what I need, for myself, I'm currently raising funds, Ben, for a content fund. I want to create a content fund. I basically want to create my own studio with this content fund and be very, I have an expansive slate. And I'm very intentional about, again, building these universes, building these franchises that which is what all the studios do. I mean, that's what, I mean, and Disney is definitely, they have done it the best, I would say, just because they have so many franchises. But building these, but also where these, all of these intellectual properties, they represent the world. It's multicultural, Ben. So these are, franchises that tell absolutely compelling stories, these universes, and also represent the world. So that's what I'm up to, Ben, and that's what I could use support with.
Cool. Well, you and I should have a non-public chat about that. Because I'm working on a few things that might dovetail nicely. But
Excellent.
Thank you again for coming. Thank you for taking the time. I know you're very busy.
Yeah,
So
my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And thank everybody for tuning in. This has been the Movie Moolah podcast. I am Ben Yenny. If you want to support this, like, comment, subscribe. Comment question, what made you want to get into film? And also check out my resource pack, which includes free investment deck templates, free ebooks, free white papers, and a lot of other stuff, including a free monthly blog or monthly content digest that will include content just like this to help you stay up on what you need to know to grow your filmmaking career. Thank you again, and see you next week.